What happens when the person who's supposed to protect you is actually the one stealing your future? Emma Rodriguez thought she was the family failure for 8 long years, struggling to make ends meet while her siblings thrived. But one innocent question from her grandfather at Sunday brunch would expose a betrayal so deep, it would destroy her father's reputation and change her life forever. What she discovered next shocked everyone at that table, and the revenge that followed was so perfectly calculated. Her father never recovered from the public humiliation. This story will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty, because sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones robbing you blind. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. Emma Rodriguez sat in the corner booth of Romano's family restaurant, the same spot where her extended family had gathered for Sunday brunch every month for the past 8 years. At 29, she still felt like the odd one out, the sister who couldn't get her life together while her younger siblings seemed to have it all figured out. Her brother Carlos owned a thriving auto repair shop and had just bought his second house. Her sister Anna was a nurse practitioner with a beautiful apartment and a brand new SUV. And then there was Emma, still renting a converted storage unit behind Mrs. Chen's house, working 3 part-time jobs just to keep her head above water. Mija, her grandfather Miguel said, his weathered hands cupping his coffee mug, how are you enjoying that beautiful condominium I helped you get? The one with the view of the river? The words hit Emma like a physical blow. Her orange juice glass slipped from her fingers, clattering against the saucer. The entire table went silent. Her mother Rosa looked confused, her dark eyebrows knitting together. Her father David's fork froze halfway to his mouth, scrambled eggs falling back onto his plate. What condominium? Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's Sunday morning bustle. Grandpa Miguel's smile faltered, confusion clouding his eyes. The one I sent the down payment for, sweetheart. The beautiful place downtown your father helped you find after you finished your accounting degree. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. She lived in what used to be a storage unit, 4 walls, a concrete floor, and a single window that looked out onto Mrs. Chen's garbage bins. She shared a bathroom with 2 other tenants and had to walk across the backyard in the rain to get to it. The walls were so thin she could hear every footstep, every conversation, every argument from the main house. Grandpa, she said carefully, her voice stronger now, I've never lived in a condominium. I've never lived downtown. I rent a converted storage unit for $600 a month. The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa's face went pale, her hand flying to her throat. Carlos and Anna exchanged glances, their phones forgotten. On the table, David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly fascinated by the salt shaker. That's not possible, Grandpa Miguel said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of growing realization. I wired $30,000 to your father 8 years ago. He said it was for your condo down payment and first year's maintenance fees. Emma felt something fracture inside her chest. Not her heart, that had been broken too many times over the years by family gatherings like this one, where she felt like she was watching everyone else's success from the outside. This was something deeper, something that had been holding her fragile sense of self together through years of feeling inadequate, unsuccessful, and unworthy. Dad, she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant, where did that money go? David's face had gone ashen. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning. I was planning to. It was complicated. Complicated how? Emma's voice rose just slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. Because for 8 years, every time I asked for help, you told me to work harder. You told me to stop expecting handouts. You told me that struggling builds character and that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. The restaurant around them seemed to fade into background noise. Other families continued their Sunday brunches, unaware that Emma's entire understanding of her life was crumbling at table 7. I invested it, David said quietly, his voice barely audible. I thought if I grew it in the market, I could give you even more later. I was trying to help you. You were trying to help yourself, Emma said, standing up abruptly. Her napkin fell to the floor, and her chair scraped against the tile. You invested my future and left me to believe I was failing on my own. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with adrenaline and something else, a clarity she hadn't felt in years. 8 years, Dad. 8 years of me thinking I was the problem. Emma walked out of Romano's, leaving behind 8 years of forced smiles, awkward silences, and the crushing weight of feeling like the family disappointment. But this time, she wasn't running away in shame. She was walking toward the truth. Grandpa Miguel caught up with her in the parking lot, his cane tapping against the asphalt. At 79, he moved more slowly than he used to, but his mind was still sharp as a tack. Emma, Mija, wait, he called out, slightly out of breath. Tell me everything. I need to know the truth about how you've been living. So she did. Standing between two cars under the harsh afternoon sun, Emma told her grandfather about the storage unit with no insulation, where she could see her breath in winter and sweltered in summer. She told him about eating instant ramen for dinner 6 nights a week, about working as a morning janitor at an office building, an afternoon cashier at a grocery store, and a weekend bookkeeper for a small restaurant. She told him about the shame she felt when her siblings talked about their vacations and home improvements, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering what was wrong with her, why she couldn't seem to get ahead no matter how hard she worked. "I pay $600 a month for a space that's smaller than most people's walk-in closets," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "The ceiling leaks when it rains, and I have to put buckets on my bed. I haven't had friends over in 4 years because I'm too embarrassed. Every time I asked Dad for help or advice, he made me feel like I was being lazy or entitled." She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Last Christmas, when Anna was showing off her new jewelry and Carlos was talking about his vacation to Hawaii, I asked Dad quietly if he knew of any full-time job openings. He said, maybe if you stopped making excuses and actually applied yourself, you wouldn't need my help." Grandpa Miguel's eyes filled with tears. "He told me you were doing wonderfully. He showed me pictures of a beautiful building downtown and said you were so independent and proud that you wouldn't even call to thank me yourself." "I never knew there was anything to thank you for," Emma said softly. "I thought you'd forgotten about me, honestly. I thought maybe you were disappointed in me too." That evening, Emma's phone buzzed with a text from her grandfather. "Can I see where you live? I need to understand what's been happening." She almost said no. The shame of showing him her reality, the storage unit she'd tried so hard to make livable, the hot plate that served as her kitchen, the bathroom she shared with strangers, felt overwhelming. But then she realized something: she was tired of protecting other people's lives with her silence. When Grandpa Miguel saw the converted storage unit, with its concrete floor, exposed pipes, and single light bulb hanging from the ceiling, he sat down on her second-hand folding chair and wept. "This is where you've been living?" he asked, his voice broken. "All these years?" Emma nodded, suddenly seeing her home through his eyes. The milk crates that served as her dresser, the camping sleeping bag she used because she couldn't afford a real comforter, the mini fridge that barely kept food cold, the space heater that was her only source of warmth in winter. "I tried to make it nice," she said quietly. "I painted the walls myself, and I got those curtains from the thrift store. Mrs. Chen is actually pretty kind. She lets me use her kitchen sometimes when I need to cook something that won't work on the hot plate." "I trusted him, Grandpa," Miguel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I trusted my own son to take care of my granddaughter, and instead he took care of himself," Emma finished. "I know, Grandpa. I trusted him too. This ends now," he said firmly, standing up with renewed purpose. "Tomorrow, we're going to find out exactly what happened to that money, and we're going to make this right." The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of her grandfather's voice on the phone in Mrs. Chen's kitchen. She'd given him permission to use it, and he was talking to someone in rapid Spanish, his tone sharp and authoritative. "I don't care if it's Monday morning, Roberto," he was saying. "I want every document, every transfer, every piece of paper that shows where my money went. My granddaughter has been living in poverty while her father played investment banker with her future." By afternoon, they were sitting in the offices of Martinez and Associates, the law firm that had handled Grandpa Miguel's finances for 30 years. Roberto Martinez, the senior partner, spread documents across his mahogany conference table with the solemnity of a doctor delivering a diagnosis. "The money was wired to David's account on March 15, 8 years ago," he explained, pointing to a bank statement. $30,000, with a memo that read Emma condo down payment. Emma stared at the paper, seeing her name attached to a transaction she'd never known existed. What happened to it after that? Roberto clicked through several more pages. It sat in his checking account for exactly 1 week, then was transferred to a high-yield investment account under his name only. Over the past 8 years, between compound interest and additional contributions he made, it's grown to approximately $67,000. "Additional contributions?" Emma asked. "It appears he's been adding to the account regularly. About $500 a month. The investment has performed quite well." Emma felt sick. While she'd been scraping together $600 each month for rent, working 3 jobs and eating ramen, her father had been building a nest egg with money that was supposed to be hers. "This isn't just misappropriation," Roberto continued. "Given that he accepted the money under false pretenses and used it for his own benefit without the intended recipient's knowledge, this could constitute fraud." Grandpa Miguel leaned back in his leather chair, his jaw set with determination. "What are our options?" "We can demand immediate restitution, with interest. We can pursue criminal charges. Or we can handle this as a family matter and see if David is willing to make this right voluntarily. Emma looked at her grandfather, then at the lawyer, then at the documents that proved 8 years of lies. I want to give him one chance to do the right thing. If he refuses, then we let the lawyers handle it, Grandpa Miguel finished. But first, I want the family to know what kind of man he really is. That evening, Emma and her grandfather drove to the house where she'd grown up, a comfortable suburban home with a 2-car garage and a manicured lawn. Emma hadn't been inside in over a year, not since the previous Christmas when she'd felt so out of place among her successful siblings. Rosa answered the door, her face still showing the strain from the morning's revelations. Miguel, Emma, come in. David's in the den. They found David watching television, a beer in his hand, acting as if nothing had happened. Carlos and Ana were there too, having clearly been called for an emergency family meeting. We need to talk, Grandpa Miguel said, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. Emma placed a manila folder on the coffee table. 8 years ago, Grandpa sent $30,000 for my condo down payment. Dad told him I was living in a beautiful place downtown, that I was so independent and grateful that I couldn't even call to thank him myself. She opened the folder and spread out the bank statements, investment records, and transaction histories. The truth is that Dad took the money and invested it in his own account. It's now worth $67,000. I never saw a penny of it. The room exploded in shocked voices. Ana gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Carlos stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. All these years, you let me think she was irresponsible, Rosa said to David, her voice shaking. You let me worry about her, let me feel guilty for not helping more. I was going to give it to her, David said, his voice defensive. I was trying to grow it so she'd have even more. For 8 years? Emma's voice cut through his excuse. While I worked 3 jobs? While I lived in a storage unit? While I ate ramen for dinner and couldn't afford to see a doctor when I was sick? She stood up, pacing to the window that looked out on the backyard where she'd played as a child. Do you know what it's like to listen to your siblings talk about their success while you're wondering if you're just fundamentally flawed? Do you know what it's like to ask your father for help and be told you're making excuses? I didn't know it was that bad, David said quietly. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Emma replied, turning back to face him. It was easier to let everyone think I was the family failure than to admit what you'd done. Ana stood up abruptly. Emma, I had no idea. When you'd leave family gatherings early or make excuses not to come, I thought you were just, I don't know, going through a phase or something. I was going through poverty, Emma said simply. While Dad was building his investment portfolio with my money. Carlos shook his head, looking between his father and sister. This is insane. Dad, how could you do this? I was trying to help her, David repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. You were trying to help yourself, Emma said. And now you have a choice. You can transfer every penny to me right now, publicly, in front of the family, and explain to everyone what really happened. Or our next conversation will be with lawyers and possibly criminal prosecutors. The room fell silent. Rosa was crying quietly into her hands. Ana looked like she might be sick. Carlos was staring at his father with an expression Emma had never seen before, disgust mixed with disappointment. I'll transfer the money, David said finally. But I don't see why we need to involve everyone else. Because for 8 years, you destroyed my reputation in this family, Emma said. You let everyone think I was lazy, irresponsible, and ungrateful. You let me think I was a failure. I want them to know the truth. Grandpa Miguel pulled out his phone. I'm calling the family. Everyone needs to hear this. The following Sunday, instead of their usual restaurant brunch, the Rodriguez family gathered at Grandpa Miguel's house. Emma had asked him to invite everyone. Not just the immediate family, but aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends who'd been part of their circle for years. Emma stood in the living room where she'd opened Christmas presents as a child, looking at faces she'd known her entire life. These were people who'd watched her struggle, who'd probably whispered about her behind her back, wondering why she couldn't get her life together like her siblings. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. I asked Grandpa to invite everyone because I have something important to share that affects how you've all seen me for the past 8 years. She paused, looking around the room at her extended family. For 8 years, I've been living in a converted storage unit, working 3 jobs, barely making ends meet. I felt like the family disappointment, like I couldn't measure up to Carlos and Anna's success. I've skipped family gatherings because I was ashamed, made excuses when I couldn't afford to participate in family trips or celebrations. The room was completely silent. Her cousin Maria was leaning forward, hanging on every word. Her Aunt Carmen had tears in her eyes. Last week, I found out why I've been struggling. 8 years ago, Grandpa sent $30,000 to help me get started after college. Dad intercepted that money and invested it in his own account, then let everyone believe I was too proud or ungrateful to acknowledge the help. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Emma heard her Aunt Elena gasp, her Uncle Fernando curse under his breath in Spanish. Her cousin Roberto looked back and forth between Emma and David like he was watching a tennis match. Miguel, David said, standing up slowly, tell them what you did. Grandpa Miguel's voice carried across the room with the authority of the family patriarch. David, tell them what you did. David's hands were shaking as he cleared his throat. I took the money that was meant for Emma's condominium. I invested it, thinking I could make it grow before giving it to her. I was wrong. I should have given it to her immediately. That's not the whole truth, Emma said, her voice growing stronger. Tell them about the investment account. Tell them about the $67,000 you've been building with my money while I lived in poverty. The investment grew, David admitted, his voice barely audible. It's worth more now than when I started. Tell them about the monthly contributions, Emma pressed. Tell them about the $500 you've been adding to my account every month while I worked 3 jobs. David's face crumpled. I've been adding money to the account. I thought if I grew it enough, she'd be grateful when I finally gave it to her. Grateful? Emma's voice rose. You wanted me to be grateful? That you stole from me and let me suffer for 8 years so you could play investment banker with my future? The room had gone completely silent. Emma could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the sound of someone's stomach growling, the distant hum of the refrigerator. But that's not even the worst part, Emma continued. The worst part is that every time I asked for help, every time I came to family gatherings feeling ashamed and inadequate, Dad made me feel like it was my fault. He told me to work harder, to stop making excuses, to build character through struggle. She looked directly at her father. Do you remember what you said to me last Christmas when I asked if you knew of any full-time job openings? David looked at the floor. You said, maybe if you stopped making excuses and actually applied yourself, you wouldn't need my help. You said this while sitting on $67,000 of my money. Emma's voice cracked slightly, but she continued. I believed you. I believed there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that I deserved to struggle while my siblings succeeded. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma could see family members looking at each other, processing this new information, probably thinking back to conversations they'd had about her over the years. Then, unexpectedly, her cousin Maria started clapping. It was slow at first, then Rosa joined in, then Ana, then Carlos. Within moments, the entire room was applauding, not polite, obligatory applause, but genuine recognition of her courage in speaking the truth. Thank you, Emma said, tears finally spilling over. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me. As the family began to disperse, people approached Emma one by one. Her Aunt Carmen hugged her tightly, whispering apologies for not understanding what she was going through. Her Uncle Fernando, who owned a small accounting firm, quietly told her about a full-time position opening up that would pay twice what she was making at her 3 jobs combined. Her cousin Roberto, who worked in real estate, pulled her aside. I have a client who's selling a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment. She's willing to work with the right buyer on financing, especially if they have a good down payment. One by one, family members who had pitted her or ignored her were now offering genuine support, not charity, but opportunities to rebuild her life properly. Emma found herself standing next to her grandfather as the last guests left. How do you feel? He asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Exhausted, she admitted. But also, free. For the first time in 8 years, I feel like I can breathe. The money has been transferred to your account, he said. All of it, plus interest. You should check your phone. Emma looked at her banking app and saw a balance she'd never imagined, $67,247.89. Enough for a real apartment, a reliable car, maybe even a chance to finish her education. There's something else, Grandpa Miguel said. I've been thinking about the rest of my estate. I'm changing my will. Grandpa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I failed you by trusting the wrong person. When I'm gone, everything will be divided equally between you, Carlos, and Ana. But it will go through a trust that David can never access. No intermediaries, no one to hold it for your benefit. Emma hugged him tightly. Thank you. Not just for the money, but for believing me. I should have checked on you myself, he said. I should have visited, should have seen how you were really living. You couldn't have known, Emma said. Dad was very good at keeping his lies straight. 3 months later, Emma was settling into her new apartment, a bright 1-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, a real kitchen, and a bathroom she didn't have to share with anyone. She'd started working at Uncle Fernando's accounting firm, using her degree for the first time in years and earning enough to actually save money. She'd also enrolled in night classes to finish her CPA certification, something she dreamed of doing but never had the time or money for when she was working 3 jobs. The apartment was small but felt like a palace compared to the storage unit. She had a real bed with a headboard, a couch that wasn't secondhand, and a dining table where she could eat meals like a normal person. Her relationship with her father remained strained. He'd kept his word about the money transfer, but their conversations were awkward and infrequent. He'd tried to reach out several times, but Emma wasn't ready for reconciliation. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple apologies. Carlos and Ana, however, had made genuine efforts to repair their relationships with her. Carlos had helped her move into the new apartment, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs while apologizing for not realizing what she'd been going through. "I always thought you were just, I don't know, not ambitious enough," he admitted as they unpacked her kitchen items. "I feel like such an idiot now." "You didn't know," Emma said, arranging dishes in her new cabinets. "That was the point. Dad made sure nobody knew." Ana had been even more apologetic, bringing Emma groceries and helping her shop for furniture. "I kept wondering why you never wanted to go out with us, why you always made excuses about money. I thought you were just being cheap." "I was broke," Emma said simply. "There's a difference." "I know that now," Ana said. "And I'm sorry I didn't see it then." One evening, as Emma sat at her new dining table working on homework for her CPA classes, her phone rang. It was her grandfather. "How's the studying going?" he asked. "Good," Emma said, looking at the stack of textbooks that represented her future. "Hard, but good. I forgot how much I actually love accounting when I'm not doing it at 3 in the morning after working all day." "I'm proud of you," he said. "Not just for getting through this, but for how you've handled it. You could have been bitter and vindictive, but you chose justice over revenge." Emma smiled. "I learned from the best. There's something I want to discuss with you," Grandpa Miguel said. "I've been thinking about starting a scholarship fund for students from struggling families. I want to make sure other young people don't have to go through what you did." "That's a beautiful idea," Emma said. "What can I do to help?" "I want you to help me run it. You understand what it's like to need help and not know where to find it. You understand the difference between charity and opportunity." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I would be honored." 6 months later, the Rodriguez Family Education Foundation was officially established. Emma had taken a leadership role in developing the application process, using her own experience to identify students who were truly struggling rather than just looking for easy money. The foundation's first scholarship recipient was a young woman named Sophia who was living in her car while attending community college. Emma had seen something of herself in Sophia's application: the shame, the determination, the quiet desperation of someone trying to build a better life against overwhelming odds. "I know exactly how you feel," Emma told Sophia when they met for coffee to discuss the scholarship. "I know what it's like to feel invisible, to feel like you're fighting a battle nobody else understands." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I was starting to think I'd never catch a break." "You don't need to catch a break," Emma said. "You need someone to give you the tools to build your own breaks. That's what this scholarship is for." A year later, Emma received her CPA certification and was promoted to senior accountant at Uncle Fernando's firm. She'd also been elected to the board of directors for a local nonprofit that helped homeless youth, using her experience to advocate for better support systems. Her grandfather was in the audience when she received her certificate, beaming with pride. Carlos and Ana were there too, along with several other family members who had supported her journey. David wasn't there. He'd moved to Phoenix 6 months earlier, claiming he needed a fresh start. Emma had heard through Ana that he'd been struggling with depression and guilt over his actions, that he'd lost weight and seemed to have aged years in the span of months. Emma felt a pang of sadness for her father, but not guilt. Some consequences were earned, and some bridges were burned by the people who chose to light the match. After the ceremony, Emma and her grandfather went to dinner at a small restaurant near her apartment, not the fancy place where it all began, but a quiet spot where they could talk without interruption. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't mentioned the condo that day?" Grandpa Miguel asked. Emma considered the question carefully. "I think I would have spent my whole life believing I was broken. I might never have discovered what I was actually capable of when I wasn't fighting just to survive. And now?" Emma smiled, looking around at the restaurant where she could afford to eat without checking her bank balance first. "Now I know that I survived 8 years of poverty not because I was weak, but because I was stronger than anyone realized, including myself." "I have something for you," Grandpa Miguel said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, wrapped box. Inside was a gold pendant in the shape of a key, hanging from a delicate chain. For all the doors that should have been opened for you, he said, and all the doors you're going to open for others. Emma fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling the weight of the pendant against her chest. Thank you. For everything. Thank you, he replied, for showing me what real resilience looks like. 2 years later, Emma was engaged to Marcus, a fellow CPA she'd met at a professional conference. Their wedding was planned for the following spring, and she'd asked her grandfather to walk her down the aisle. She'd also been accepted to a graduate program in nonprofit management, with the goal of eventually running her own foundation. The Rodriguez Family Education Foundation had grown to help dozens of students, and Emma wanted to expand its reach. The night before her engagement party, Emma sat in her apartment, her second apartment, actually, a larger place she'd moved to when she could afford the upgrade, and wrote in the journal she'd started keeping after that first family dinner when everything changed. She wrote about justice and truth, about the difference between revenge and accountability. She wrote about forgiveness, not the kind that excuses bad behavior, but the kind that frees you from carrying other people's mistakes. She wrote about family, not just the family you're born into, but the family that shows up when you need them most. About her grandfather, who had chosen to believe her over his own son. About Carlos and Ana, who had apologized and made genuine amends. About Uncle Fernando, who had given her a chance to prove herself professionally, and she wrote about David, with a forgiveness that surprised even her. Not because she was ready to rebuild their relationship, she wasn't sure she ever would be, but because she understood now that his actions had revealed more about his character than hers ever could. Emma closed the journal and looked around her apartment. The walls were decorated with her CPA certificate, photos from family gatherings where she now felt comfortable and welcome, and a framed copy of the first scholarship check she'd presented to Sophia. This was the life she was meant to have. Not the one stolen from her, but the one she'd built from truth and hard work and the support of people who truly cared about her success. As she prepared for bed, Emma thought about tomorrow's engagement party, about the wedding she was planning, about the graduate program she'd start in the fall. She thought about the foundation and the students they were helping, about the difference she was making in young people's lives. She thought about all the doors that were opening for her now, and all the doors she would open for others. Emma Rodriguez had learned that the truth doesn't always set you free immediately. Sometimes it takes years to surface, and sometimes it hurts more than the lies ever did. But when it finally comes to light, it doesn't just change your present, it redeems your past and opens up possibilities for a future you never imagined, and that, she thought as she turned off the lights in her beautiful apartment, was worth every difficult moment it had taken to get here. The key pendant caught the moonlight streaming through her bedroom window. A reminder that sometimes the most important doors are the ones you have to fight to open, and that once you do, you can spend the rest of your life helping others find their own keys. Don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest, tell me in the comments below, we read every comment.